Hello there, everybody. That's David. That's Omar. No Jubilee today, but she is in our thoughts and prayers, and she misses you all as well. And I am Charles. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the South Star Classroom. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Actually, let me do this because there's another person that's leading this conversation, and let's let him lead that thing. The beard of knowledge, the beard of wisdom. I can never remember. I don't know why. My memory, man. But both are fitting. And his beard is luxurious today. One, David Castillo.
All right, let's do this. So, welcome everybody, and welcome Omar and Charles. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that we've definitely have touched on before, but it is a persistent issue, and so we are going to return to it. And we're gonna go in. We're gonna go in hard on this one because I'm growing quite tired of continuing to see the persistent gaps around this particular thing that we're going to be talking about with Black and brown children generally being furthest away from opportunity in the state of California, and we're going to talk about Texas too. But before we dive into that, I wanted to hear from both of you. We've had again, a lot of news. News cycle is very active, but let's focus on one event. I want to hear what your one highlight was and what was your low light coming out of Sunday's Super Bowl.
Oh, I can start. The low light was that the Super Bowl matchup was the Chiefs and the 49ers. I'm a Raiders fan. It's the worst possible Super Bowl you could have. And the Niners had a chance to pass Dallas in the Raiders stadium. Like, I like the Raiders and the Bears. I grew up in Oakland. I was born in Chicago, so I like both those teams. And my friends are split. Some of us like Raiders, some of us like the Niners. So that was the worst thing that could happen. The best thing was that the Niners didn't win. So if I had to pick one, I don't have to hear from Niner fans. There may be a Niner fan on this episode. I don't know. But Mahomes, Patrick Michael Jordan Mahomes came through and won it in thrilling fashion. And, they were this close. They were that close, but no cigar. Those are my best and worst moments. Judging from David's face, I'm curious to hear his response.
I'll let Omar go next, and then I'll go.
So, look, I'm going to just be dead honest.
Don't get too philosophical, okay?
Come on. Everybody else, man. Dude, I love being philosophical. We got in such a philosophical conversation last week. Here's my 2 cents. I don't care. Don't give a shit about the Super Bowl. Don't give a shit about the NFL. Don't give a shit about the NBA. Look, what I mean by that is that as a person who enjoys sports and so forth, I got no skin in the game. Do I care about the NBA as an organization? Hell yes, dude. It's fucking awesome. I support it. It's an American organization. It's jobs all around. Talking about advertising, marketing, everyone who makes those basketball games, those football games happening, everyone, and including the players, that is something that I deeply celebrate. As a sport, do I have any skin in the game? Nah, man. I grew up in El Paso. I guess El Paso people are Cowboys fans, but I don't know, dude. Yeah. They're all kind of drunk and obnoxious, so I just didn't associate myself with Cowboys.
This is not the question to ask Omar Yanar.
No, it's not.
Again, David Castillo.
My brother-in-law,
I wanted to catch him off his feet.
Huge 49ers fan, man. We went to school in San Francisco. He is diehard 49ers fan. And I was yo, this guy's so hardcore. I wanted to be in a different state. So I was. So as Charles always where the hell were you? I was in undisclosed locations past weekend. Came home and saw Mahomes throw an interception in the third quarter. And I was oh, dude, this is over. Magic Mahomes throwing an interception. Even with me knowing as little as possible about football, I know enough about Mahomes to be that is a critical error. And I definitely thought it was going to cost him the game because I was the one thing KC has better than anybody else is the head game. I mean, their head game is insanely strong, and they're used to this, and they're used to being under pressure. And I didn't think San Francisco had the mental game to win it. So when he threw the pick, I was like, I think this could go the way of San Francisco. And it was back and forth, man. And I was like, yeah, this turned out the way I thought it was, but a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. So you're talking about the highlight is the unpredictability. I thought that was pretty dope.
How is he still going? How
I know. I don't like football. I didn't watch the game, but hold on.
Yeah,
play by play.
And Usher gave one of the best Super Bowl performances. That was a great performance.
Yeah.
Dave, can we just say, like, this guy's like a hell of a performer, man. That residency in Vegas clearly got him prepared for this stage, because that was
I think 30 years in the game got he's been doing it for a minute.
This guy's good, man. He good.
Yeah. I would say my highlight was definitely the halftime show. I've been a long time Usher fan. I thought Atlanta was definitely like shining on the stage with all the guests, so it was really good to see that. Usher still has it. You know, when he took off his shirt, everyone was like, "What? Oh, there it is." You know, the man still he's still fit. He's still looking good.
The man ain't been allowed to touch bread in the last 7 months. He said somebody
exactly. Yeah, he went straight to the buffet after the Super Bowl.
Dude, that was the irony, dude. He had Temple of the Dog singing "I'm Going Hungry" completely before the game. Just being followed around by Temple of the Dog for 7 months.
But I want to hear the rest of Davis. I want to know who Davis was.
The downside for me was, and this is not new to this past Super Bowl, but the Super Bowl has gotten so kind of caught up in the stardom of it. Not even talking about the players, but like everybody who shows up and this whole thing. And I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. But I think, just the way that the media has been pumping these particular stories, right? And then it turns into a conspiracy theory, like a Swiftgate, right? It was an actual like conspiracy theory that was being floated around out there that the game was going to be handed over and, called for the Chiefs. And then, Kelsey and Taylor Swift are going to go out on the field at the end of the game and, vow their support for Joe Biden, right? Like people thought that was going to happen. Apparently it didn't happen. But I just think
people were saying that?
Yeah, man. Yeah. It was. Yeah. I'll invite you to some of my Facebook groups. Just to see how that whole thing turns out. And I feel like it's a distraction away from the actual game. And so I can really do without that and just kind of return to football. But the stadium looked great. I'm glad that the Raiders have a brand new stadium that looks, they weren't playing, but I'm glad they have a beautiful stadium to play in.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous stadium.
Man.
I had to. I'm coming down with something. I'm a little under the weather, but I had to. I was it's over now. I had to go speak in Napa. I spoke to the county education office, and then I did a separate talk and book signing and training with some parents out there, which was really fun. But rush back. I've traveled on Saturday. I had to go through Vegas. To get back to Chicago because my uncle, I think you all knew, I lost my aunt a few months ago, and my uncle is still here holding on. And I said I would host, and so my uncle wanted to have Super Bowl, so it was cool. I made it back in time. Exhausted though. I got back like 11. I left early in that morning. It was a long, crazy travel day. But he was happy, man. I don't know how many more Super Bowls he got. So we got to chill and like have that, I'm starting to come down with something. But my patience, like I've had short patience around me, like not with him or anything like that, but just in general, man. I think it's because I'm getting sick. But it was good, man. He enjoyed it. He got to watch it. Like I didn't get wrapped up in any of the politics of it. I mean, of course they're gonna flash to Taylor Swift because she's a high profile person, and and to be honest with you, Kelsey struggled in the first half, but not that second half. He was a dog in the second half.
That's right.
A monster. And to the point where he bumped his coach when they got that fumble and was like, "Hey man, don't
Yeah,
have
I
me out
saw
the game
that.
on these plays."
You know, that's interesting. I mean, so that moment where he bumps his coach, and he's a big man, the coach was
He's
not
huge.
expecting it. What if that had been a
black
Latino
dude.
player or a
That's the
black
talk
player,
that's been on. I
right?
mean,
Like, what if that had been a black or Latino player?
I think there's an
It
easy
would have
way
been
to
a
answer
whole.
this. I
Yeah.
think it depends on the player, to be honest with you. I think if Patrick Mahomes did it, I don't think it would have been seen a certain type of way. I think if certain
Well, you
players,
know what I'm saying, right?
I think some people question Patrick Mahomes. If the league really sees him as black, if we don't get into these type of politics, but
Yeah.
I think in that heat of battle and with their track record and how great they've been, how much they've won, I don't with that situation, I don't read that much into it. In a losing team or in a team where you don't know these people to be very close knit or whatever the case is, like these three are they're intertwined for the rest of history. And for the way he played afterwards, I don't know. I didn't think too much of it, but I knew what the conversation was going to be online.
Sure.
And look, there's a lot of things that's going to get black and brown people, and this may be one. You know, I'm just like,
you imagine if Obama had a son that was a crackhead.
It would be crazy. It would be Obama wouldn't have been president. He wouldn't have been president. He wouldn't have been president. Like, we know this.
Let's we can go all day on that stuff.
You know, but it was a good game though. It went to overtime. It went to the end of overtime. It was, you know, the rules was a little shaky for some people. I thought they was gonna go into a second overtime, but it was good. It was a good football game.
So follow up from last week's show. And I wasn't getting the references, but I was pretending that I was getting the references that you all were going back and forth with on this film, this Ready Player One.
Ready Player One, right? Okay.
The book, and then the film. So watched the film last night with my son, who's 13. It was like perfect, right? Because I remember playing Adventure. Adventure was my jam, right? Okay. That little like mystery like dot that you had to get. And I made it to the end, not the end of the game, but I made it to the to get the what do you call it? The whatever they call it, not the prize, but whatever it is.
The Easter egg.
Yeah, exactly. That's hidden in the game. Yeah, so we watched this film last night, and we were both blown away by it. It was fantastic. So I mean, didn't read the book, but watched the film. I hope it was a decent adaptation from the book. But we both really enjoyed the movie.
Okay.
Kind of freaking out about it. And you know, it's now, I don't think it was on Netflix, and now it's on Netflix, and it's actually like in their top 10. So I think with the release of the new Apple VR stuff, it's like, you know, the movie's probably getting a good boost, similar to Tracy Chapman's song "Fast Car." Got a recent boost,
right? Yeah, I mean, the movie looks great in there. I mean, when you watch it on Netflix, you won't get the 3D, but if you got it, I bought the movie a long time ago, and it was cool because Apple automatically upgraded anything that was a 3D movie to let you have access to the 3D version. I watched it in 3D. It was nice. It was really cool. But
wow,
it was very cool.
It's got to be pretty dope.
Yeah.
It was excellent.
Well,
so
dude,
thank you for the recommendation.
I'm glad, man. Yeah, dude. I mean, also fun book. So if you get a chance to read it, you can kind of tell the difference between the book and the movie. Book is really excellent, man. It
excellent,
really is.
Yeah, the book is from like 2011. Film comes out in 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even like 2011 to be, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's like the vision or the kind of vision that Orwell had when he was writing 1984, like in the 40s or whatever. But you know, technology is definitely moving a lot faster now than it was back in the day. So still very interesting, especially based on the show. Watching all the people in the streets, they're just like when they're fighting, like nobody's looking at each other. They're just like fighting in the street.
Yeah.
Like what's going on?
Like, dude, you're about to start seeing that. Like you see the memes of these folks on like the New York subway, like just, you know, glasses on, dude. Like what's gonna happen like 5 years from now when everyone's walking around with these glasses and stuff, dude?
Well, 5 years from now,
or tomorrow.
I'm thinking but 5 years from now, the glasses are gonna look more like the glasses you two have on, I think.
Exactly.
It's gonna be getting there, right? Like, I mean, it's the same way when people, if you go back and listen to stuff about cell phones and when the iPhone came out, people were like, well, who? I remember when the iPhone came, it was like BlackBerry was making fun of it, like, who's gonna want to type on like a glass. People only want to type on an actual keys. Or it was like, well, who needs a camera in their phone? Like I have a camera, or I have a radio player. Now, things have shifted. So I think we're just on the precipice of one of those things. And I think that movie was both a reflection and an appreciation of technology, but also a cautionary tale of what it could be and what it could do. And there's going to be negatives that come along with it, the way that you all and Jubilee pointed out. So, but it's such is life. But the point that I was making, that toothpaste is out the tube. Yeah, it's not going backwards now. Like it's here. Like so we got to figure it out.
We talked about it on the way to school this morning, just about the lessons learned from the film. And one of my big takeaways and appreciations for it was, at the end, the little kernel, the little nugget they dropped about some of the changes that they made in the Oasis, right? Mm-hmm. In this virtual reality space. Once they took it over, and they shut it down twice a week, right? So you can't be on there 7 days a week. You can be on there 5. Everybody takes a break to kind of just be human, because the only thing
really sucks though, if the 2 days they chose was the days that you off for work.
You're off or something.
It's very arbitrary, but yes, but it was interesting.
I thought that was cool.
I'm interested in this topic you got for us today, man.
Okay. So today we are returning to we're going to talk about California a bit, and then I'm going to ask Omar to talk a little bit about what this landscape looks like in Texas.
Yeah, we're going to talk about California and why you should
California first. Yeah, California. Oh man, don't get me started on him. So we are talking about the California, whether the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world, a state also that has one of the like a world-class two statewide university systems, the California State University and the University of California. So we'll start there, right? If you live in California, if you have residency in California, you can attend public college university in California for what they call in-state tuition. You can go wherever you want, but once you leave or you go to a private school, the tuition, goes up. Out-of-state tuition or private school, it gets very expensive. And historically, what we've seen and what we continue to see, and we've done some like deep dive work on this in Oakland, California. I know Charles and Dirk has, and I've helped out with some of those efforts.
I'm crunching stuff now.
Yeah, looking at the difference between students that graduate, because you can graduate in California from high school, but if you do not have the correct coursework with the correct grades, they call that the A through G. In California, you are not eligible to even apply to the CSU or the University of California systems. So you can be a graduate, you could have graduated at the top of your class, but if you're missing a year of English or a year of foreign language or a year of math or whatever it is, the electives, or if you have those classes but you don't have the right grades, meaning no D's and no F's, you are ineligible to apply to our two great statewide university systems. And so there was a recent piece that came out, which shows that we have school districts, we have large high schools in the state that, some of them are barely graduating. You might be graduating 80% of your students, and of those 80%, less than half are even eligible to apply to the UC and CSU system. So you have 100 kids, 80 of them graduate, and say 35 of them are eligible to apply to state colleges in California, right? Universities. That means 35 out of 100. And if you look at that 35 and you start to break it down demographically, there are very few Latinos in there, and there are very few African Americans in there. There are very few students that receive special education services. There are very few unhoused. Most of those kids are white and Asian, and they continue to be. And so the reason I wanted to bring this up, not just because of this recent piece, and Charles, if you can, if you have access to the piece right there, or can I shoot it to you? Just to
You can
look at
send
some
it.
of the, I'll put it in the private chat. There's a couple of graphs, which do subgroups, and they do by race and by subgroup. In this moment where we have book bans, right? And people, are wanting to remove any conversations around race in schools. Even Democratic politicians are more concerned with, gender politics and book bans than they are about what really matters, and that's actually, changing these particular outcomes. So, when the current political and dinner table conversation right now is around, let's just stop talking about race. It's not helping. It's making things worse. I'm going to double down and say we have to talk about race, especially when we look at these types of persistent outcomes. So this is looking at California A through G by subgroup, and what you see are, you start at the top, and then as you go down, you have, less than half, about 32% of students that are low income, right, are graduating A through G. Unhoused students at about 20%. English learners, we have a huge population of English learners in California, yet probably 16%, 17% of them are graduating.
18.37% in 2022-23.
Yep.
And then students with disabilities, only 14.7%. Homeless, the latest was 20%. And then socioeconomically disadvantaged is 36%.
36. Okay. So for all the talk that we hear in Sacramento and other places in California of equity, for some reason we still can't wrap our heads around. Can you go back up? There's one more of those graphs, Charles, the one on top, which has the racial breakdown. It's the first one. Thank you. Perfect. Right there. Yeah. So here now we have the same graph, but with different characteristics. Here we are looking at ethnic racial groups. And here we go. We got about
Asian
70%.
Is 72%.
Yep.
51% for white. Total for everyone is 44%.
Yep.
Hispanic or Latino is 36%.
Yep.
Black African American is 32%. And then African Indian or Alaskan Native is 25%.
Yeah. And this is only of the kids that are actually graduating, right? This is percent of graduates. Right. So there's a deeper cut to this, but I wanted to raise this issue because it seems like, our Democratic politicians are talking about the wrong things. Republican politicians are talking about the wrong things. And what they're not talking about is what really matters are these particular outcomes specific to California, right? Like, I don't know why Gavin Newsom hasn't, pulled the fire alarm on this one yet. I don't know why Tony Thurmond hasn't pulled the fire alarm on this one yet. Maybe it's coming, but I wanted to bring this to the forefront and hear what your initial thoughts are, and maybe Omar, before we go into solutions, Omar, maybe you can talk to us about like what this looks like in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna find, honestly, the exact same statistics across the board, particularly when it comes to English language learners. So like the conversation that I've been having for the last several weeks, for the last several years, for the last decade, is I don't think that anyone in this nation has truly understood how to work with English language learners. Now, whether they be speaking Spanish, like the majority do in El Paso and in Texas, or California, where you've got a classroom where someone's speaking Greek, Hindi, Farsi, Arabic, Spanish, what you're finding is a very similar statistical situation where students who specifically, you're going to find the exact same trends that you see on this graph of English language learners struggling immensely to achieve, basic graduation requirements according to the STAR. socioeconomically disadvantaged students like through the roof, right? I always talk about the statistics in Texas, which is essentially that 6 to 7% of Latino, so like low income Latino kids have a probability of graduating from college. And oftentimes what you're seeing in this report is that for a lot of our Latino kids in Texas, a lot of low income kids, they're being told by the high schools to specifically enroll in community colleges, get their basics done, and then transfer to their local UT or local A&M system, right? And I mean local, like University of Texas at El Paso, local, right? UT Pan American, local. UT Brownsville, or now it's UT Rio Grande Valley, RGV. So what you're seeing is a very similar trend in Texas, wherein lies, I think, a very underlying political truth that I think Doc has talked about since day one, which is just an underlying truth that we see in this nation, which is that it's not just the fact that people have not figured out exactly what to do for low-income kids, have not figured out what to do for Latino and Black kids, have not figured out what to do for especially English language learners in this country. I think that honestly, people pretend to give a fuck, but they don't. They don't care because it's their kids that are going to college.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what's going on is that it's an informational gap in addition to an academic gap. So who in the high school is doing the hard work of consulting with kids to get into whether it be a four-year university or even just start the community college process in high school to get that college credit and then merge themselves into either a four-year university or a clear path from community to university? And what I mean is a clear path. Here's what we're starting. I want you to do a year here. Here are the courses, and then here's how to transfer, and this is what we're doing. Or this is exactly, we're going to do Apply Texas, and we're going to get you into a Texas university off the gate. That level of knowledge exists within the white middle class contingency, the upper middle class contingency. Hell, in the Latino and Black middle and upper middle class, those things exist, right? But what you find is that in the low income brackets, predominated mostly by Black and Latino folks, there's an information gap and an academic gap. And then most importantly, David, I will go as far as saying that I don't think institutions give a shit. I don't think that they're here to truly help them because they're like, hey, man, we're graduating enough kids and getting enough kids into college. Why do we need to help these kids?
Right. Yeah. And so going back to those, and we don't have to show them now, but the data is very clear, right? There is an opportunity gap, right? And in California, you can log on to a system and we can see this opportunity gap. It's a little harder to track this data in Texas, right? It doesn't seem like your Texas Education Agency is not pushing out this data so easily for people on the outside to see. And my thought is well, in California, it's there, you can see it. Nobody's doing anything about it. Not that I've seen systematically across the state. Nobody's pulled the fire alarm. And in Texas, it's hard to see it. So, my brain goes to the system is working as it was designed to work. So why change it, right? Which is a scary thought.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you all said. I mean, the question of why do students of color face more challenges in school, I look at it the crack epidemic versus the opioid epidemic. And I think there's a lot of things that you pay lip service to, but it's hard to empathize on those things when it's not of impacting or affecting you, or if it is impacting or affecting you, but you have the structure in place to where there's a safety net there, or you can figure something else out, then that doesn't become everybody's problem. I think with opioids, we saw people that with policies where people that smoked crack, used crack, dealt crack, had to go to jail and be under the jail, and they were criminals and crooks and degenerates. And then when opioids started to hit, the family members of Congress members, when it started to happen to white folks or people that people have a kinship with, then they found empathy, and they found ways to kind of like try to talk about this. Also, I think gambling is going to be on that new frontier soon, where they pushing gambling, but it is what it is. I just think that, and what the system is. Like at this point, I said this in Napa, and I've said this before. If you have a refrigerator and the refrigerator breaks and you keep putting milk in it and then you keep feeding your kids spoiled milk, yeah, the refrigerator is jacked up, but at some point, you got to stop putting your milk in there and feeding it to your child. Like at some point, how much does somebody have to say they don't rock with you? How much evidence do you need to where it's like, yo, these are the same issues that was happening in the 80s and the 90s, the 2000s, and the 70s. Like it is public education has always been bad at scale for Black people and brown people and poor people. So I mean, I'm not saying don't let the system off the hook. Don't ever do that. Push that system, and at the same time, it takes for our community to love ourselves and to make sure we have what we need. Like in village type communities, there are other teachers around. Like people are getting lessons in their church. They're learning things at their boys' club. They are learning things from independent people. And again, at some point, I can't keep just complaining about the fridge if I'm not going to throw it out. If I'm gonna start using ice and ice buckets and coolers or whatever the case is, and I just, it's a tough question, man. It's not tough, actually. It's a question that probably infuriates, because there is nothing new that we have learned. The data that you just showed us was the data from last year, and that was the data from 5 years ago, and that was the data from 10 years ago. And then California said we need to make sure kids are graduating with X type of skills, so we're going to do a California exit exam. Oh, people couldn't pass the California exit exam, and it's embarrassing us as a state, so we're going to get rid of the California exit exam. We're not going to improve the education. We're not going to make that better. And I think that people care about, there's a mix of low expectations and apathy, and the inability to be able to hold these systems accountable in a way that's meaningful, in a way that actually has a consequence to it. There's no consequence of failing to educate Black, brown, poor kids. It's just, there isn't one. And if you switched this teaching core from being 80% mostly white women, 80% white, mostly women, that's teaching all these Black, brown, and poor kids, if you flip that on his head and there was a bunch of Black women and a bunch of brown women that were teaching all these white kids, and it was constantly being failed over and over and over again, they would have burnt that shit down to the ground. So that's my take. Not trying to be not trying to build virality. It's just truly how I feel.
But we do have, so I'm not going to push back, but I'm going to say, and we do, I understand the component around the teacher demographic, right? That's a long-term fix. That is what it is, and it's going to continue to be that, for some time to come, until it's a much bigger mountain to move. But we do have examples of programs like Avid, right? In the article, they talk about a program called the Heritage Program, right? That focuses on African American students, and there's a program called the Legacy Program at some of these high schools. So I don't want to water down the work that they're doing, but these programs all pretty much kind of do the same thing, right? You have a big comprehensive high school. You have a teaching force that's mainly white, with students that are not mainly white, and so these programs are able to be that bridge of support for Latino students, for African American students, to do early college awareness, have more intensive counseling around grades. So if Omar's a 10th grader and he didn't pass 10th grade English, they're going to encourage and figure out a way to get Omar into a summer school course so he can take that between 10th and 11th grade. So he's making up his credits along the way. He doesn't get surprised in 12th grade when he's trying to apply to college that his D's and his F's don't count towards his college applications, right? They do college tours. They do parent education, right? Bringing parents along on this process. These are things that have been done. We did these things 20 years ago at Unity, right? These things can work in the smaller charter setting and smaller high school settings, in where it's like a school-wide program. But in the big schools, you have them as kind of separate programs, right? They're like workarounds. The African American male achievement in Oakland and now beyond, right? These are not like core teaching programs, but they exist in and around what's happening in schools. And so, I mean, we have models, and I'm just my question is like, why aren't we scaling these up, right?
Why
Like
isn't
every
who
school should
scaling
have
them up?
one.
Dude, I
Yeah.
mean, like that's
I'll go
exactly
after
the
Omar. I'll go
point.
after Omar.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. That's exactly, dude. I'm gonna say exactly what Doc's gonna say is that, David, you already know the answer to this, and Doc already knows the answer to this. It's a dearth of leadership. So if you're going to ask why aren't exceptional programs scaled, then I have to ask the question, who is going to take the ownership of finding a legitimate problem and taking the responsibility for saying, this is something that I'm going to move forward in solving? And then I have to ask, what is the impetus for any superintendent in this country? And I'm calling out the superintendent of Los Angeles, the superintendent of San Francisco, the superintendent of anywhere in El Paso.
Houston.
I will say, yeah, Houston in particular, dude. I will eliminate Dallas because I think Mike Morath, who's now commissioner of Texas, actually really cares about this issue and was working very diligently to work on this when he was doing a ton of work in Dallas. But like, I asked those superintendents, what is their initiative to actually get this done? And is this something that they even care about? And if they say they do, then show me the proof of what you're doing for your most low-income schools. So Houston recently had, as we all know, their superintendent released, and then this new cat had to come in, who we all know about, and then their board is now under direct supervision because they allowed a school to fail 9 years in a row, a low-income school, and they're like, hey, we made all these gains, we've done all this stuff, and I'm like, yo, like, cool, but what were you doing in terms of working with the most disadvantaged? And it's, again, the thing that I blast through the mountaintops is that there's not attention to the most disadvantaged. It's always political cover. It's always like, yo, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And then people forget about it, and then they do nothing about it. If you don't have a moral leader who is taking it upon themselves, him or her, to say, this is a mission that I am going to push forward, and I'm going to orientate our entire organization towards working to make not only a difference, but find a formula that works for the most disadvantaged, you're not going to find the proliferation of that, because even if we invent the formula, other people then have to say, we're going to grab onto it. And I want to know, like, you've been in the business for a while. How many superintendents are chomping out there to actually make that their mission of their school district?
No, yeah. I mean, this is a problem. It's not just a problem with education, but I find it's like a government issue, right? Where government, and we're talking about public schools, so they are part of the government. Let me try and make this like universal. There's funding for all of these things, right? And so we are going to give money for X, Y, and Z. And what tends to happen in government circles, I'm including public schools in that, is we love metrics that say what we are going to do, not in terms of the outcome, but in terms of the input. We are going to buy this many Chromebooks. We are going to feed this many children. We are going to, we are going to take these actions, right? And you measure the actions. But what we don't do is measure the outcome or impact of those outcomes. And even if you do, the way that this works, and you said it earlier, and Charles, you've seen plenty of this in Oakland, the superintendents are in and out in 2 or 3 years, right? With the current exception in Oakland. But, there's this churn of superintendents. So you never actually get to a point where we're going to evaluate Superintendent Cole on what he said he was going to do 4 years ago. And now we're at the 4-year mark. He's still employed. You said you were going to change graduation rates by XYZ. You said you were going to improve attendance by XYZ, math proficiency, English proficiency. Show me where that's being done.
Right.
Where a superintendent is being held accountable for actual outcomes.
Quick interjection. Dude, this is this is the issue with Disney, right? This is the issue with major corporations, is that you have someone come in and they're making dipshit long-term decisions because what they're isolating on is short-term profit gains in order to demonstrate, look at me, I'm the wizard. I'm made all these quarterly reports increase dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, dude, it's the same thing for a lot of these superintendents. They know they're going to be in and out in 2 to 3 years. There's no time for any accountability because then they're going to go to some plush ass school district that's doing all the work for them. So what they're going to do, short-term gains. Hey, let's find out how I can get the biggest bang for the buck, who we can help out in order to demonstrate that I'm a wizard. And by the time that everyone realizes that I destroyed the entirety of the system, I'm already out of here. And I think therein lies like a huge issue is that it's not just the duration of these superintendents. It's not just the spinelessness of these superintendents. It's not just the fact that they're like D-list politicians instead of educators and know how to run an organization, which they don't. It's that the time frame also manifests itself into basically acquiring short-term gains and leaving long-term disaster. And I mean, like, that just straight up pisses me off, man. Like, someone was like, why the hell is Omar still superintendent of this school district? Aren't superintendents supposed to only be around for 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, like, they're not. It's part of the problem.
Yeah,
Charles, what do you got to say?
You're dictating the problem.
I look at it like this, man. I think that we can talk about funding. We can talk about superintendents. You can talk about all this stuff. I also think that the lay person doesn't understand the business of school. I've worked with a really good superintendent that did work really, really hard. And I watched all the barriers from other adults that propped up in front of him. I watched us say, we're going to put more resources in these struggling schools. I got these Black kids and we want the best teachers to go there and the most resources. And I watched adults and I watched the union shut that down. I've watched these things happen. I would say this though, man, my conversation isn't on superintendents or the school structure. My hope just can't be in a system that has constantly failed. I just don't need that fool's errand ever again. Yeah. Like, and I train people to use schools to your benefit. Like, there's a need that you have for this school. If you need these grades, if you need this, then that's what you need to focus on. Use that to get to the next level. If playing ball and playing at Tech is the way that you're going to get seen to go to college to play ball, then utilize that. Have a plan, but your real education may come from that school. And if it does, it's a blessing, but you have to take advantage of these other invisible institutions. Again, I can't keep having these conversations about what these people that don't care about the people that I care about, that don't have to be held accountable for it, like, are going to do. Like, I just think that's a fool's errand. I think that how do you go from being an enslaved people, where as soon as slavery ended, these poor people that were enslaved put their money together, got with their church and built one-room schools and taught people how to read better than what we're teaching people how to read now. Like, I just want to be very, very clear. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I said this in my talk on last week in Napa, and it made some people uncomfortable, but it was true. I said, you know what? I was part of people were enslaved in this land, on this country. And when a slave owner had an enslaved person, they could do anything they wanted to that enslaved person, except teach them how to read. And now I grew up in a state where less than 30% of the Black kids, the brown kids, and it ain't too pretty for the white kids and the Asian kids, where less than 30% of those kids that I just pointed out are able to read on grade level. Yep. That is abysmal. So is the solution going to be going back to the entity that does not have to care, that doesn't have to do these things? You mentioned Disney, and I would say this about Disney. There's a key difference between those. One of those is a public entity that utilizes tax dollars and where you live and all that stuff, and is tax-free and things like that. The other is a corporation. And here's the thing. The corporation is held more accountable on any day than that school is. Kathleen Kennedy ain't sold a lot of movies in Star Wars, and you know what happened? They're making a lot of changes about how Star Wars is going to look. The Marvel movies that was slated for this year, that shit has gotten scraped, and they are redoing things because those stakeholders and shareholders said, hey, check this out. We're not making the $1 billion that we used to make. I need to see something different. The fans walked away. But if we keep feeding our kids to that, and you keep putting them in there, and the money keeps churning, and 20-day count keeps coming out, and this is what continues to happen, why would they change anything? And here's the thing. People talk about funding. Actually, and David can probably speak to this, you have no idea how well some of these poor schools are actually funded. There's a lot of money that tends to go in a lot of different places, right? And like, there's a lot of places. If you look at the per pupil rating and price in certain places around to educate a child, and you look at it for a black kid in one of these schools, and you break it down per pupil, it's actually a lot of money. Then that's why you got a lot of parents saying, just give me the damn money. Give me the money and let me do what I want to go do with it. But again, these answers don't fit nicely or into like, it's hard to have this conversation. And we talk a lot about feelings, but everybody else, all the countries that have surpassed us are talking about results. And they're talking about what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do. So I'm not
even talking about feelings, man. I'm talking about like actual lives of young people. Right?
But you've been to as many school board meetings as I've been to.
Yes.
And it always devolves down to a feelings conversation. And how do we placate people?
So right now in California, it's an approximation. High schools, the kind of high schools that we would work in probably receive upwards of like $15,000 to $20,000 a kid, right? When I was running Oakland Unity High School under No Child Left Behind, when we had a 90% A through G rate, our revenue per pupil was about $6,000 a kid. And we had a 90% A through G rate in Deep East Oakland. So don't talk to me about money. Not you, I'm just saying anybody.
Right.
So this is California, right? This is brought to us by the good folks at EdSource, who are good at lifting up this data, but it doesn't matter if people aren't going to look at it and politicians aren't going to take any action on it. So what you see here, the orange and red dots this is rural California. So we have a rural crisis. It's even worse. It's bad in the inner cities, but in the urban areas, but it's even worse up here. You have schools that, that are like, I don't know what school this is. This is, 90% of the kids are lacking A through G courses at this school in Plumas Unified, right? You can see this is the divide in California, rural versus urban California. It's real. It's not, this is LA. Right. You look at all this out here in the high desert, Central California. So one other thing I wanted to point our attention to before we move on here is,
and I'm sorry, really quickly, gentlemen, I apologize.
He has to bounce early. Have a good one, man. We'll see you next week.
Our audience, I'll see you all next week. Thank you.
You got it. Yep. You got it, boss. So this is good too. These are good, and this is good for us, Charles. Charter school students, 61% in California, right, are not eligible versus 55 in I would say regular schools, students, traditional schools. You say regular, right? More male students are ineligible, right? So you have a 10%, 11% gender gap right there. 2 out of 3 Latino students were not eligible in the state of California to apply to a public university. I mean, how's that for a headline? Governor Newsom wants to run for president. Tony Thurmond wants to run for governor. I don't think so. 7 in 10 Black students were not eligible to apply to a public university in 2023. And then overall, 6 out of 10. So,
yeah, man, it's whack. It's jacked up. It's wild. You feel me? Like, it's just, it is. I mean, and that's what I'm saying, man. And it's like, at some point, like, I'm not talking about fair right now, man. I can tell you a whole bunch about what fair needs to be. What I am going to tell you is that the communities that can come together and educate their own and make sure that there are things in place for when they are failed, do better. Yep. I can tell you that we need each other. I can tell you that, and if you have a great school where things are happening, I think that that's incredible, and you should support it, and you should support those educators, and you should also not wait for this system to do well by you. Like, listen, man, if we still waiting for that, yo, man, I got a bridge in Idaho to sell you. I'm ready. I can get it to you right now. Like, you pull out your checkbook. So again, man, I'm not trying to be mean or cutthroat or anything like that.
No. But
these are just tough conversations, because I'm just like, how often do you need to see it before you like, that dog ain't gonna hunt, bro? My brother says that all the time. When you beating the idea to death, he's just like, hey, man, that dog ain't gonna hunt, and it hasn't hunted. So
this is another way of reframing this data right here. So 61% of charter students are not eligible. 55% of students in traditional are not eligible. So these are the origins of the school to prison pipeline, right? This is the origin of the school to prison pipeline right here. This is the origin of the school to prison pipeline right here. And we can keep going. This is the origin of California's school to prison pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say it's not real, well, we'll show them where the seeds are planted. They're planted right here, point blank. Point blank. That's where they're planted. So, given all of that, let's end on this note. So you've done a lot of work in the parent space, and working with young people as well, with students and their families. So a lot of this data that we're looking at is what they would call macro level. It's a big, huge data sets, right? And again, thank you to the people at EdSource for putting this together in a visual way where people can kind of understand it. Now let's periscope down to the level of a young person and their parent. You're looking for 8th grade. Charles is going into the 9th grade. What questions should Charles' parents be asking the high schools that they're visiting as they're applying? What are the questions?
A few, man.
Yeah.
You should be asking a few. One, I would ask to see how well, people matriculate through the school and what that looks like. Especially, I would try to understand the profile of my child and try to see, as far as my child is concerned, I would ask them how do they talk about proficiency versus grades? That's always a thing. Like, even just now, I talk to these people in Napa, and you think that, there's some money in Napa, but there's some poor people in Napa too. There's a large migrant community in Napa as well.
Yep.
And even these people that have college degrees and all that stuff of their own, like, they are often shocked when you say grades do not equal proficiency. Just because your kid got an A in that class does not mean that they're proficient. And we have to talk about that. So I think understanding what mastery and proficiency is and what that's needed about. I think the other thing too, if you got a black kid, if you got a brown kid, especially, boy and girl, I was gonna say boy, but girls go through this too. I would ask the discipline policy, and I would ask what that looks like. And I would say, here's how I'm available, but how do we be partners around this? And then I would power map around that place. What does that mean? It's stuff that organizations do, schools do, people that run after school programs. What are the other programs? What are the other things that I can take advantage of in the area to supplement what I may or may not be getting at this school? So libraries are still free and terribly underutilized, to the point that many of them have closed. So like, museums are underutilized. Boys and girls clubs. There's a lot of 501c3s, like boxing, like rings or whatever. Like, there's a lot of different things. And I would try to build a plan around my child and wrap them in services. But I would also, have a goal for my child's life. And I would lead with that goal as I'm taking them to that school. And I would be very specific as, how does this help my child get to that place? And I would also, I think you have to move and operate with this like a business. What do I mean? I'm not trying to, I know they don't be some, neoliberal type. I'm not saying any of that. What I mean is, in business, most people that do good business, they know how to negotiate, they know how to set a goal. And if something isn't working for them, they know how to move on or get or remove that thing. Like, he talked about Disney. I promise you that Disney is going to be shaken up a lot based off those numbers that just came back. The guy that ran Marvel left and was living a good life, is spending his money. That thing tanked. They got his ass right back in there and said, we need you to fix this. And Daredevil rated R is coming out, like, at some point this year, right? Like, so, the point is that, we have to, like, your best investment is your child. And you and that child are going to be the only people that really have to deal with those consequences. And I'm not telling you to be an isolationist, but I'm telling you that you have to put that well-being first, and you have to be brutal and operate in that, especially if you live in a place that's represented by those numbers. Because I don't like 3 out of 10 odds. Those odds suck, especially if the alternative is your kid is going to be on a fast track to prison. That ain't cool.
Yep. Yeah, but let's not talk about race in we're in a post-racial era in the United States of America. So let's not talk about that, right? When all the data that we just looked at clearly says that we still have huge racial disparities. In California, Omar said it probably looks the same in Texas. So I agree with you. I think as a consumer, as a parent, knowing what this data looks like, in the schools that we're looking at, we ask the same thing. We ask about graduation rates. We start there. We do look at test scores. Test scores are not like a make or break thing. It's like part of the equation.
Right.
But honestly, maybe I was conditioned in a certain way, but like if a school's hitting like 50-60% proficiency, I'm good with that, and that's probably a low bar. But that's just kind of how I view it. Third, I'm going to let them talk to me about it first. And if they don't bring it up, I will bring it up to them. But I will ask them about A through G. So what does your graduation rate look like compared to A through G? We had one school do that, Helix High Charter, which is in the Big Picture Network, in their open house for prospective 9th grade students. They told us, they're like, historically, the schools had a good graduation rate, but our A through G was very low. And they showed us like over 7 years what it did. And they almost closed. So the A through G is almost the same as their graduation rate. And they told us how they did it. And I was like, yeah, all right, I hope I get in this lottery.
Yeah, it's called alignment. It's called alignment.
Exactly.
It's called, oh, that's what the A through G requirements are? Well, guess what? Here's what our graduation requirements are. Guess what? A D, we're not going to treat that as passing. We're going to treat that like this. Like,
and here's how we got there.
Crazy
it was like
novel how that works.
It was a perfect line. It was a perfect line. So I had a bag of cash. I'm like, who do I give this bag of cash to get in this lottery? I wanted a low number. And so that's an important thing. And then the other thing is like the sense of belonging, right? Because we live in this like area where if you go to schools to the west of us, they tend to be more inclusive. They celebrate things like Latino history and African American History Month. If you go to the east of us, they don't really do that. They're like, we just treat everybody the same. And they don't necessarily have all the different clubs, right? They do sports and they do academic clubs and social clubs, but they don't do like, they don't have like a BSU or a Latino Student Union. And that's interesting. And those things are important to me too, especially, if my child wants to be part of that, I want them to be able to find that space in a school. So ask about the different like inclusive clubs that they offer outside of the academics, right?
I mean, and listen, man, I wrote a whole book that's free on a lot of this stuff, man. And
that's right.
And I think that it's free, much to the chagrin of my team. I paid a lot of money for it and don't make a lot of money off of it, which is fine because I wanted it out there. But again, all this stuff is about what you as a parent, as a student, as somebody in that community that cares about the stuff, what you can do, what you need to do before you even start talking to that school, how you articulate the beauty and strength of your child. We make parents even go through this thing around answering this questionnaire, and it might look silly, but you'd be surprised. We have boxes of Kleenex come out because it's hard to, do I know what makes my child smile? Do I know what type of environment my child is most productive in? Do I know what motivates that child? And like, how do I set a goal? This is things that need to happen before you even go into that school. And then guess what? What are your rights? Because you don't know your rights does not mean that somebody is going to, stop what they're doing and make sure that they tell them to you. And then we got the communication strategies in there for you and how to introduce yourself. Yeah. You asked about questions. Here go it's questions and stuff. You're all like, this is what you saying when you meet that teacher. My child and I want to be in partnership with you. My child is a bright and capable human being with likes and strengths. My communication lines are open. Here they go. I have high expectations for my child in this school and you. Like, you can have high expectations of me. Here's how you introduce yourself. Here's how you track. how often you've spoken. I tell my parents, you need to talk to your kids' teachers at least twice a semester, whether it's email, phone, whatever, a drop in, and track it and go more if you need to, right? Like, we built this stuff. Things are here. There are tools to help you. How do you escalate
and you can like, swap out black for brown. Anything. I'm sure there's some areas where it might not be relevant, but for the most part, it's the same stuff.
It's the same. Let me tell you, the funny thing is, and I'll put the link down, it's charlescode.iii.com. But like the funny thing is, I wrote it, I put it out. The messages that I got back, I got more messages from Asian families, Asian immigrants who said, hey, I hope you're not offended that we used your book. We weren't born here, but our kids are Americanized. They go to this place, and this was really helpful. Like, it can help anybody. I just am not a person. When I try to write for everybody, I write trash. So I just write directly to who I know and what I know. But I'm just saying, man, the point is that, like, you have to look, man, it ain't fair. I'm not talking about fair. I wish that you could snap a finger and all the schools was great and rocking and doing that. But you've seen enough information. How do you take some of the stuff in your own hands? How do you supplement? How do you rebuild that village that's helping you educate yourself and that child? But I've been running my mouth. I know we got to close out.
We got to close out. I'm generally a very understanding person. And I give people the benefit of the doubt, and I think in this case, I'm giving our systems the benefit of the doubt. But like, I'm turning the corner. I was like probably the last. I'm into. I'm a big fan of professional cycling, right? And I was like the last dude on the planet that thought Lance Armstrong was clean. So so here we are. Thank you for joining us.
They all were doping though. If does it change things? They all doping?
Doesn't change it. It doesn't change the fact. Doesn't change the fact that I thought he was clean.
He still beat cancer.
I believed in him.
Nobody was clean.
Yeah. So anyway, South Star Classroom podcast, episode 129, closing the persistent gaps in education. And I'm glad that we identified the problem. We've talked about it a lot, but we also moved to some solutions. So
appreciate you, man. For Jubilee and Omar, that's David. I'm Charles. We will see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad station. And I need to fix it because I said episode 128. So we are on.
Yeah, we're off.
We'll be back with episode 130 next week. Is episode 130. My God, man. Thank you all for helping us get through this many episodes. David, I want to just send you kudos. You put together a great topic, and just your leadership as a whole. Me and this entire community appreciates and loves you, brother. Beard of knowledge, beard of wisdom. I know he put it in there. I like saying them both. See y'all next time. Oh, for Jubilee, because she's not here, we would have to.
There you go.
There you go. All for Ju. Peace.
Woo.